right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another very, 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 very special episode of Big Time, the podcast, video podcast. These fantasy drafts are so popular; they're popping up every other night now, and we're back with another one for Kent. We're doing for Kent basketball tonight, and we brought in some heavy hitters for tonight's episode. We got some guys making their debut, some guys making their returns, and we're just going to jump into it. So, going around the horn, back making this is what Laughn's third appearance in 3 weeks. Laughn, class of '94. Ready for the basketball draft. How are you feeling tonight? I mean, you've had plenty of experience in this draft thing here. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm good. I mean, with the rules where we can't draft the other coaches, I mean, it makes it a little easier. I draft Ryan, obviously extremely athletic. I draft Paul for his basketball mind. He was coach of the year this year. And I draft Charlie in case there was ever, a dance off or a one-arm push-up contest at round point. So I draft them all.
All right, and we're gonna keep we're gonna go with the guys that have been here before, and we got Coach Murph making his second appearance. He's gonna be our draft expert. Coach, how are you doing tonight? And what are your expectations tonight? Are you nervous or what's going on here?
I'm doing really well, and it's really nice to see all the people. Some of these people I haven't seen in over 20 years, and I always love talking basketball. And we're going to span about 40 years of it. So high school in Fort Kent, high school basketball in Fort Kent is going to get thoroughly covered.
Absolutely. And then making our way around the horn, we're going out to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We got Big Bro Charlito making his, I don't know how many appearances. The reason why it's called Big Time, Mr. Big Time. Charles, dressed for the occasion tonight. You're what, 0-2 in fantasy drafts. How are you feeling tonight?
0-2 hurts, but what hurts even more is on Monday night when we did the draft pick from 1999 to 2001. I didn't even get chosen. So what am I even doing here? I got the smarts, so I might not be an athlete of that caliber, but I got this one tonight here.
You didn't make Minzy's all-time team, though, so I mean
that's huge.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
All right, making his podcast debut. This is a guy. His name's been dropped a ton, and we've been after him for a while. Luckily, Lonnie came through for us. Out in Colorado, we got class of what, 96? Is that right, Ryan?
Long time ago.
Long time ago. And as I mentioned, this is your first time on the podcast. We're doing a 4 Kent fantasy draft in which you would probably normally be at the top of the list. Obviously, you're not one of the available players tonight, but curious, how much research, time, and effort did you put into this? Because Charlie's been going hard with the research. I'm just curious what kind of effort you put into this.
I'm going to say 0 to none. I think, I misunderstood the actual, draft rules because I was under the impression that we were team captains and we were going to be on the team. So I figured that regardless of my picks, I can make up for a lot of the inefficiencies of my but now I'm going to be scrambling. Honestly, I've got about maybe 20 names written down, and we'll see how the draft goes. But I don't know. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. And then wrapping things up, we got another guy whose name has been mentioned a ton on the podcast, and luckily Laughn came through for this guy as well to get him on. I don't know, Paul. Class of what? Class of 90?
Class of 90, absolutely. Long time ago.
And busted out the varsity jacket. Still looks just as good as it did back in the day.
Well, you don't see how many buttons or how many snaps are buttoned. It doesn't quite go all the way down anymore. But I enjoy taking it out, and like Coach Murph said, to be able to catch up with some of these guys. I had the the good fortune of playing for Coach Murphy for a little bit, not on the basketball court, unfortunately, but on the baseball diamond, and then I had an opportunity to coach with and coach a couple of these other guys. So I'm looking forward to kind of taking it deep, taking it back in the old days. I think maybe some of the names I bring up are going to really refresh some memories from back in the day.
I'm anxious to see who you've remembered from way back. Yeah,
and
it's all just off the top of this ball dome too.
I'm just curious. I mean, you busted out the jacket. What pins do you have on there? Do I see a tennis racket on there?
Absolutely, yeah. I played tennis for 3 years, my first 3 years, and then of course, in the early years of recruitment, Murph, I think, coached just that my senior year baseball, and he got me on board for baseball. But there's soccer on there, basketball. I've got a volleyball one because you remember, maybe some of you remember the volleyball, the real competitive volleyball in between seasons where we'd go out to to Caribou, Presque Isle, play those teams. A lot of fun. And I'm one of the few guys I think in Fort Kent with a basketball on the back. I mean, soccer was so much more of a common occurrence back in the day. Lonnie?
I got a hooper. I'm a hooper.
You got a hoop? All right.
All right, look at that.
If I had it, I'd show you.
Charlie, where's your jacket?
They didn't have one for JV.
They did. You just had to pay more.
On the sleeve, it said JV.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I've got help already.
look at this, bringing in the help already. You may not need it because people, for people just now seeing you for the first time in a while, the coach of a very successful team, some say probably the best team in the entire state this year, coach at York currently. I'm guessing that's got to give you some type of advantage tonight going into this thing in terms of how to build a team, what you're looking to do.
Well, I mean, I certainly I've learned from some really good coaches out there. I've had some great teams. I think I've certainly been a mentor to Laughn and taught him a lot of what he knows. I do have some things up my sleeve, though. He's still got some things to learn.
All right. And Ryan, I'm just curious what your approach is here. Are you just going to draft best available, or are you trying to build your team in a certain style, or what's your approach?
Haven't thought about it. I think I'm going to go best available because, coming from, Fort Kent High School basketball, everybody was about 6 feet tall. So I don't think you're going to gain any advantage from going center first or guard first.
All right. And Laughn, obviously you've had some success as a head coach as well, and you've had successes as a fantasy GM. What's your approach tonight? Are you going best available? Or are you trying to build your team in a certain way? What's the approach?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to kind of see how the keeper picks work out first. But I think, best available. You can never go wrong with best available.
And Charles, not only are you the best dressed, you're also probably the most prepared. I mean, on the last couple of podcasts, you've had literally 100+ names of individuals that you've put together on your big board. How much time and effort has gone into tonight for the draft?
Well, I didn't want to show it this early, but here, it's right here.
Oh, here we go.
Oh boy.
Probably 160 names.
All right.
I'll shout out to some of the guys I reached out to real quick.
Yeah.
I got Steve Perro's opinion, Joey Bard, Robert Plord, Bob Parent, Kelly O'Leary, Travis Delisle, Casey Bushi, Gary Thibodeau, Jason Netto, Legs Labby, and I reached out to 2 individuals.
Legs Labby?
Legs. And I got Matt Roslingall's all-time starting 5 from Fort Kent. And I got Ryan Dupre from Caribou. Chico, that is Parker Dupre's dad. I got his opinion too. So got my homework right here, boys. Let's go.
How many?
Hey, just remember, all that homework last night got you the bronze medal.
I know. Still fun.
It sounds like only you can mess this up, Charles.
And Charlie, how many of those teams, how many of those players or people's input did you write your name at the bottom on?
No, none this time. Actually, I got mentioned twice. I'll tell the funny story again, though. Legs Labby, when he submitted his list last time, he didn't have Laughn on it.
Oh.
Memory loss.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get into it here, I want to bring in our draft expert, the man who coached a lot of these guys and has seen a ton of Fort Kent basketball, just basketball in general. Coach, I'm curious, what is your approach to building a successful team? When we had Minzy on, he talked about building around a goalie and his defense. I'm curious what your approach on the basketball side would be.
Not so much what type of player, meaning center, guard, whatever. The first thing, and these guys will remember this, is hard work. Hard work. Doesn't matter if you're 5'8" or 6'8". If you're not working hard, you're not getting it done. You're not being as successful as you can be. And there's no success gets accomplished without hard work. So I'm at, you go hard and we'll figure out how best to use your talent. And then from there, you just try to play to their strengths and hope that they always want to play hard. Don't let the scoreboard dictate how much energy you put out, but put out energy no matter what the scoreboard's telling you.
All right. And I just want to get one more little piece here before we get started. Last time, Laughn, you kind of maybe cheated by hitting up Minzy ahead of time, asking for advice, getting names. Did you talk to Murph prior to tonight to kind of pick his brain, or how did it work?
See, I talked to both of them to get them on here, but I didn't ask the questions. I'm keeping the integrity of the draft intact. So I actually talked to him about him remodeling the kitchen and how many times he's had to redo things over again. But that's about it. No, just to get him on here.
All right.
Funny how you talked to him about remodeling his kitchen yesterday, though. That timing is interesting.
You're sharp.
I got one thing too. I didn't talk to Coach Murph himself, but I got his son's list right here in front of me too. So if anybody was close to the source,
Yeah.
I got it right here.
All right. So before we get started, we're just going to go over the draft rules for tonight's fantasy draft. So we're doing a 6-player draft. So basically a starting 5 and your 6-man. Your first 2 picks are going to be individuals that you actually played with. And I know some of you guys kind of overlap in years. So if there's a dispute, we'll just do a coin flip or odd or even to determine who gets that player. And then your last remaining 4 picks will be from any era in Fort Kent basketball history. So to get things started tonight, we're going to go opposite of what we have been doing. We have been going oldest to youngest. Tonight, we're going to do youngest to oldest. So Charlito the Greats, where are you going with your first pick?
With the first pick in the draft, Murph's talking about hard work. There's no teammate that I've ever had at any level, at any sport that worked harder than this young man. May he rest in peace. I get emotional just thinking about the fellow, but J.R. Bushi.
Wow.
All right.
I wrote his name down. I was hoping somebody would remember it.
Oh, for sure, number 1.
You got it.
And then Charles, your second pick?
I'm gonna go with Anthony Lamar, a high flyer with a 6-foot frame. A little more meat on him. He could have been a lethal force.
All right. So 2 great picks. And Murph, just want to get your initial feedback. You mentioned JR having a spot on your list. What are your thoughts on those 2 picks, JR Bushi? And I don't know if you coached Anthony Lamar.
I had Anthony as a freshman. Well, Travis more or less had him as a JV player, but we had some time together. But the J.R. Bushi pick is that's a good one. He's legitimately a hard worker. I remember his second year he played for me. He come up to me and says, "Coach, I let you down last year. This year I don't let you down." And he proved it too.
He's one of those guys that could have played. He would have been a role player on Laughn's and Ryan's team. Like not a scorer, but he would have worked his ass off for those guys too.
He would have been helpful for sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna keep it moving here. We're gonna go to Ryan. You get 2 picks. Who are you gonna go with your first overall selection?
So just to clarify, are these players now or in their prime?
We're gonna go in their prime. In their prime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it easy for me. I got to go with my guy Corey. He and I had a lot of battles growing up. We played together for a long time. So yeah, he's hands down my number 1. I think obviously my number 2. It's not obvious, but I need some shooters on my team. So I'm going with Jason Neto.
All right. Shout out to Jason, who's made an appearance on the pod before.
He was the only guy that wrote his name on his own list that he submitted to, so he wanted this.
All right. So, Coach, I mean, Ryan's teams, those mid-'90s teams, those are probably the teams that we remember most in terms of your time at Fort Kent. I'm guessing you have no objection to his 2 picks there, Corey and Jason.
0 objections. Nobody works harder than Corey. Jason can shoot the lights out. I still remember his game at Hodgson where he scored 10 threes in a hostile gymnasium, a fully packed gymnasium. And that night, I think we could have called a play from midcourt. He'd have scored it. But anyway, no, 2 real good picks, 2 solid players.
And I think he hit 7 of those threes in the second half too.
Yeah. He had a hell of a second half.
Yeah.
I got it somewhere on the YouTube channel. There's the Rennie Kluge WAGM recap from that game. I have it online somewhere, so I'll definitely try to repost that along with this to give Jason some love. And Coach, can you clear this up? I've heard a lot of stories about Corey and that he had 1,000 points and 1,000 rebounds, and he may have tried to pat those stats a little bit by missing on purpose. Is there any truth to that?
Well, he might have had a couple of putback bunnies that he might have missed on the first try, but no, legitimately though, hard worker, earned his 1,000 rebounds.
All right.
I got to tell a story on a putback. It's something that I remember and I bring it up regularly, talking about a putback, missing a shot, a layup, and then putting it back in. Sean Thibodeau. Now, there was 2 Sean Thibodeaus. This was the postman's son, Sean Thibodeau, playing with me at Holton. Holton was pretty good back then. Terry Cummins was playing and whatnot. And they were certainly looking for 100. And we got a timeout called, and Lloyd Susi was coaching. Lloyd says, they're going to want to score 100. We are not letting them score 100. I want to shoot in their basket the next chance we get. Who wants to do it?
Wow.
Sean Thibodeau was that guy. He was the guy that says, I'll do it, coach. He runs in, misses the putback at 99, has to get the rebound and put it back in to score Holton their 100th.
Wow.
Uh,
I like that. I heard about that from someone.
Was
first
hoping
time
that
I heard
story
a
was
story
going to
like
come
that
out.
was from Leroy Marquis. Leroy pulled that off also. You know?
Leroy's got a few stories. I hear them every time I talk to him, but there are some good ones.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we're going to Laughn for your first 2 picks. I'm curious if you and Ryan overlapped. Did you have anyone off your board that he took? Do we have any disputes here, or are you good?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to make this interesting right off the bat. You know, a little controversy is always good. And, you know, Corey doesn't get fought over very often. So, you know, I'm looking for Corey also. You know, and just to talk about the 1,000 rebounds, 1,000 points, like I'm pretty sure in his scrapbook that when Carla was keeping the stats, that she counted those that he threw off the backboard to himself as an assist too. And he was pretty close to 1,000 assists.
Wow.
So I'm gonna go for Corey also.
All right, so we're gonna just settle it the same way we did on the Minzy one. So Laughn, you can call odd or even.
All right, I'm gonna go with odd.
We got 4, which is an even number. So Ryan gets to keep Corey. So
He wants me
Laughn,
back
you're
on
back
the
on the
show.
board here.
Do we get to pick another number if I choose to fight over Corey when I get a pick up for him?
Did you play with Corey?
No, in just the rant in the any error.
Oh no, the any era, there's no disputes. It's
No
we're gonna have a
dispute.
draft. We're gonna have a draft order. So whoever you know picks the player, that person is off the board at that
All
point.
right, I just wanted to throw more love to Corey.
They could actually have a push-up contest on the screen here, and whoever does the most push-ups gets them.
All right.
Put your jackets on.
Yeah.
All right.
So Laughn, you're back on the board there, Laughn. You're back on
All
the
right.
board.
So, you know, I've mentioned this guy before, teammate, but also like another big brother, but the abusive big brother. I'm going to go with Travis Delisle. He was a guy that was a worker, competitor, and honestly, he wouldn't lose any contest if he had any control over it, no matter what it takes. So I'm going to take Travis Delisle.
All right, and then with your second pick.
So second pick, I'm going to go with what I consider to be one of the top athletes, top 3 sport athletes to come out of Fort Kent. You know, in my time, I got a chance to overlap him for a year. I'm going to go with Steve Jalbert.
Steve Jalbert.
Who didn't get picked in the soccer draft, if you guys want to believe that one.
I picked him.
Did you in the soccer draft?
Yeah, I picked him early.
Really? I thought
Picked
you
him.
went later.
And I can't help but notice you go with Travis at number 1 in this draft. You picked Timmy Desjardins early in the last draft. Did you need protection, or what's you tough guys around you? Or what?
Hey, so that was the thing. I mean, I was 5 feet tall when I got into high school. I was probably 5'2" by the time I was a sophomore, and I always had a big mouth. So I needed guys to back me up. And so those were the guys that I kind of kept close.
All right. So
Do you
coach,
still, do you still hide behind Tyler these days?
I'm gonna bring in Coach for your feedback here, your opinion on Laughn's 2 picks, Travis and Steve Jalbert. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I remember Stevie Jalbert. He's very athletic, and I actually got to coach him one game against Caribou when Lloyd was sick one time, and we were supposed to lose that by 20-something. We gave him a run and lost by 5 or 6, but Steven was the best player on that team for sure. And Travis, everything Lonnie said about Travis is right. His passion, his competitive spirit, his determination. No, 2 very good picks there too. It's tight. It's already tight.
All
There's
right.
been no bad picks in this thing.
All right, we're gonna bring in Paul now with your first pick. Who are you going with?
Well, you know, certainly I was Steve Jalbert was on my board. He was a year younger than me, and someone that really came along as we kind of grew. He's now living 10 minutes down the road from me, and he's coaching his daughter against my daughter, who 7-year-olds, so 8-year-olds. So it's really cool to see that kind of him giving back. He was a great player. But my first pick, I guess, is a kid. Everyone's a kid, I say nowadays, right? Is someone that, gosh, I wore this Letterman's jacket a lot with this guy. We spent more time running around in his Ford Mustang, riding, the loop in Fort Kent. We were running mates in the backcourt. I was fortunate enough to play, as a junior with some really solid seniors on the court. Steve Perro, competitive. He and I had a lot of yin and yang, little pull-up jumpers, drive to the rim. And we both didn't really enjoy playing defense all that much.
I like that pick. Who's your second pick going to be?
Well, my second pick is someone that I've had more conversations with, that I've played basketball in the last couple of years, kind of given and taken, going back and forth on text chains. Chris Lozier, and we're not supposed to recruit as high school coaches, but I did put a push in last year when his team up in Hamden, Bryce's team fell out of the tournament early, and our team lost early. I said, boy, wouldn't it be nice to connect next year? So Chris and I have communicated and had lots of fun this last year, going a little back and forth. Chris was talented, did a lot of really, really great things. Was wearing number 23 right when Jordan was, and just someone I really enjoy playing with.
All right, so just to be clear, you're drafting Chris and not Bryce, right?
I'm gonna take Chris. I still think, again, like I said earlier, Dad has some tricks up his sleeve as well with his son Bryce.
All right, so we're gonna bring in Coach Murph. Your thoughts on those two picks? Stevie Perro, one of my favorites from growing up, just from Hack League on Sundays. Obviously, it was before my time. I didn't see him in high school, but your thoughts on those two picks?
Stevie Perro is a competitor. I'm kind of looking at this. The people like Stevie, Travis, Corey, those are hard-nosed competitors. Those guys help any team out, and Stevie, awesome with his effort. And I thought he did play some defense, Paul. You said he didn't like any defense, but I see him. He irritated a lot of people that he guarded. So
well, I will say the guys that were playing defense on that team were guys like Brent Tardy and Raymond Bouchard. Those guys were in there to just to aggravate and annoy other teams. Those two guys were tremendous on the defensive end. It allowed Chris, Steve, and myself to maybe concentrate more on the other side.
On the fun side of it, yeah.
I will say, though, like you're asking if it was Bryce or Chris. I'm pretty sure that Mr. Basketball trophy is next to Chris's bed, not Bryce's.
Indeed.
And Chris is a solid player. I didn't get to see Chris play maybe his senior year a little bit. I was busy at the college, but Chris is a solid player.
All right, so we got our first two picks out of the way. Before we get to the open air here, we got to get the draft lottery figured out. Charles, are you? I didn't even coordinate with you ahead of time, but you're kind of our draft lottery wizard here. So
Kind of carrying the podcast, so you can say it. So the way we've done this in all the previous ones is inside this bag, we have 4 names on 4 pieces of paper. It's just going to be random draw. First name pick gets the 4th pick, 3rd pick, 2nd, and 1st. All right. And they're in the bag. The last 2 drafts, I've had the 4th pick in both of them, so it's not fake. So let's hope for better results tonight. With the 4th pick in the draft, with the help of my daughters, we're going to go with Laughn Berthiaume.
all right.
Stickers for you, bud.
They really trying to make sure there's no three-peat, huh?
With the 3rd pick in the draft, we got – I kind of like the 4th pick because you get the 5th also, right?
Yep.
But here's the 3rd pick. We're going to go Ryan.
Okay.
Holy shit. I'm getting up there. 2 sheets left. Here we go.
4th is better than 3rd, actually, in this format.
With the 2nd pick, we're going to go Charles.
Uh-oh.
And with the 1st pick, we got Paul.
All right. So before we get started here with the open era draft, I want to bring in Coach Murph. I'm just curious, with the names that haven't been mentioned yet, who do you have at the top here? Who do you think are going to be some guys that are picked off the board here relatively soon?
Well, you've got
Don't give away my strategy.
there's lots of people. I mean, I've got a list of 20 some people down here. There's some Ben Raymonds, there's some Aaron Mollettes, there's some Chad Fourniers, Lucas, the Droles. We've already taken care of Anthony Lamar and J.R. Boucher. There's Brent Marquis, a hard-nosed guard from Travis's days. That he's a dependable player. Couple of teammates of Lonnie's, you know, Matt, Derek, Brad. Lots of people.
All
Lots of people.
So, Paul, before we got started here, you mentioned that you were going to maybe go way, way back and pull some names out that people haven't heard in a while. So you are on the clock here with your third overall selection. Who are you going to go with?
Well, you know, I think when you look at the maybe top 3 players in the history at Fort Kent, we've got 2 of them that are GMs here on this podcast, and then a third. So I think, you know, if it's like the Jordan pick, you would hate to miss on Jordan the first pick. So I've got to pick Tommy Pelletier. Obviously, 1,000-point scorer, could do it all. Had probably his best game as a freshman. Well, maybe not best game, but had a huge game as a freshman down in the tournament, brought his team to the tournament. So got to pick Tommy.
All right. And
I'm shocked by that pick. I'm shocked.
Coach Murph, obviously you didn't coach Tommy, but do you remember Tommy Dahl from back in the day?
I know Tommy really well. I met him. I was a senior at Caribou High School, and we were having summer league games. And Tommy was a freshman, and right then in summer league, you could tell that kid was talented. And he didn't prove anything wrong by that. He went on to be even better than he was as a freshman. He, like Paul said, as a freshman, went down to the tournament and went to the big time and put on a big show. Not intimidated whatsoever. No, Tommy was ahead of his time with his skills and his ball handling and his shooting range. And think about this: no 3-point line, and near a 2,000-point score with no 3-point.
He's the school's all-time leading scorer, right? I think even today, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So Charles, that has to hurt. I mean,
It does, because when I look at my whiteboard, I have 14 lists submitted, and he's at the top of 13 of them. So they weren't all in order of their all-time favorites, but Tom Pelletier was at the top of 95% of them.
Was Jason Neto at the top of Jason Neto's list?
He's like number 9, probably. He put himself behind you, Ryan, and Corey, though. So.
All right. So Charles, your third overall pick. Just to recap so far, you got J.R. Boucher and Anthony Lamar. Where are you going with the third pick?
Add this guy to the mix, and he's already a championship. So I chose him with my first pick in the Hackley draft. I'll choose him today. I'll choose him back then. Mr. Joey Bard, forever and ever, even at his age.
He's still paying you allowance, isn't he?
With that exchange rate, it's nice.
No, but last time, when were we just up home? Was it for? We were up home in February, and we went to the college and played one-on-one, and Dad still beat us.
Crazy.
Just the hardest.
Can I comment on Joey Bard?
Yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
I remember watching Joey Bard grow as a basketball player. And I don't think that anybody put more time in to try to be the best player he could outside of the gymnasium than Joey Bard. Joey Bard has always been someone I've had a lot of respect for because he made himself a player. He worked himself into being a player. And then look at he's still hacking it up, and he's still picked every time they want a teammate. You know? True.
Even outside basketball, guys, he doesn't stop. Construction when we were younger, and even today, he doesn't stop that man. So.
And Charles, just to be short, biggest Cavs in the draft, right?
Yeah, because John Smith's not on the list tonight.
All right, so now we got Ryan with your third overall selection. We got some big names off the board. Curious where you're going here.
Oh man, yeah. See, I'm just scratching names off the list here. It's a tough one. So I'm torn to stay in my era, but I'm going to go with a younger guy. I actually never saw him play, but he did go to my alma mater, and I need some size. I got Corey. I'm gonna go with Big Country Mitch Roulette.
Wow.
Great pick. Teammate of
know.
mine. That was a
SJP.
monster.
Yep. We're going big.
I was hoping these old guys wouldn't know about Mitch here. I was going to scoop him up, but hey, you're on your game here.
Big Country. I like that you called him Big Country.
Murph, any insight on Mitch? Obviously, he didn't play for you. I don't know if you saw.
He was a youngster when I was there, but I did watch him play quite a bit when I think Timmy Farrow was his coach at the time. And Timmy did a nice job of developing him, and he got the most out of his skill set.
All right.
The best player to go into St. Joe's, is that what I'm hearing?
Could be. I know his coach was tough. His coach was a teammate of mine, so I figured he could play.
Ryan, did he play in the Chamber of Horrors at all, or did that end right after you?
The Chamber of Horrors ended my junior year.
Okay.
Yeah, it all went downhill from there.
Best home court ever.
Best home court ever. Can't argue with that.
We played there. UMFK played there in a district final, and the next year they were banned from hosting because of all the violations during our game on their site. All kinds of site violations. So yeah, the worst place to go play, and it was a Chamber of Horrors that day. It lived up to its name. But
Hey, I'll say this. My freshman year, I went down to St. Joe's to play in the Chamber of Horrors, and we had a sophomore on our team that had transferred from St. Joe's to Farmington. And he got heckled and yelled at the entire game, and he never got off the bench.
Wow.
Was it only by the nuns?
And then when they got the new place and they opened up, they had their first game in the new place. Like they used to chant, "You can't win here" at the Chamber of Horrors, right?
Yeah.
I had just graduated, so I was a first year as being a fan, and so I was down watching UMF play St. Joe's, and UMF ended up beating St. Joe's in their first place, and they were 0-1 to start, and we might have started the chant, "You can't win here," and it could have been me that started it.
Thanks for bringing that up. Right. Thanks for bringing that up.
There was a brawl after that game too.
There was the brawl happened, I think, 2 years before, or it was 2 years before that, actually, against Husson.
That was against Hudson.
Yeah. So yeah, we could talk about those stories forever, but let's
Yeah.
leave that at the end.
Second podcast. That'll be the next one. All right, Lon, you're on the clock here. The third overall pick. Your third overall pick. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm going guard now. Guy that high energy, actually was one of the best cross country runners in the state. Teammate, but could go all day. Brent Marquis.
You took my point guard away.
There was a Brent that used to hang out with Carrie Misha. Was that Brent Marquis or Brent Hardy?
Marquis.
He came to one of Travis's practice when I was young, and I looked up to him. I didn't remember his last name.
All right. So, Lon,
Lonnie, you're going hard onto the group that I played with. All three of those guys, I had the chance. Steve was a year younger, and Travis and Brent. Those guys were competitors, and certainly, my senior year, they had to do a lot of things for us, and they were super talented.
All right, Lon, we're staying with you. Your fourth pick, right back at it.
Yeah, you know what, Charlie? You kind of alluded to this guy. I mean, he was Kerry and Brent. They played together for forever, and honestly, he was a guy that had some untapped potential. Extremely athletic. I mean, he could stand underneath the hoop he was probably 6'2", stand underneath the hoop in his socks and just jump up and dunk it. So he was a guy that physically strong, could jump out of the gym, left-handed, kind of one of those, sneaky, smooth scorers, really when he wanted to be. I'm going with Kerry Michaud. And honestly, these guys were on Murph's first team. I was a sophomore, and there was 11 seniors on that team, and we were really unlucky that was Murph's first year with that group, because I really think that if he'd have had 2 years with that group, 2 years with that senior class, that it would have been a really, really special thing.
All right, so yeah, we'll bring Murph in. So he went with Brent Marquis and Kerry Michaud. Your thoughts on those picks?
I love Brent Marquis. He's a Steve Perel mode. He's the same kind of guy, hard nosed. plays a lot bigger than he is. Kerry Michaud. Lonnie talked about untapped potential. I've never seen or never coached a guy with so much athletic ability, but so hard to motivate or uncork his intensity. Could never get him to be as intense as, if he was ever intense, he'd have been the dominant force on a court. And the first time Lonnie talked about this, but the first time I saw him dunk the ball was at Holton. He was in his socks, like Lonnie says, and the ball rolled up and hit him in the shins. He bent over, picked it up, jumped up, dunked it with two hands. And I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "What is what?" but that's how nonchalant he was about everything. And then in that final game against Holton that we won in overtime, he blocked the last shot Holton took. He blocked it, cupped it in his forehand, in his hand and forearm, and landed, and the buzzer went off.
Wow.
And that, I mean, he was in the lane, penetration, elevation. He goes up, and he didn't just block it. He just took it. A Bill Russell kind of thing. But anyway.
All right.
But that's why he needed you for another year, Murph.
Oh, yeah. I felt bad for the guy. I tried everything under the sun to get that intensity to come to the forefront, and it would just come in little flashes. But
Wow.
All right. So we're back to Ryan for your fourth overall selection. Just to recap so far: Corey Thibodeau, Jason Neto, Mitch Willette. Got some size. You got a shooter. Where are we going now?
Tough. I have a lot of guys left on the board, but this might surprise some of you. I'm going with a really young guy, only because I need a point guard. And this kid, I guess, recently scored 1,000, so he's in the 1,000-point club at Fort Kent. So I'm going to go with Jace. Is it Rochelet?
Rochelet.
Anybody ever seen him play? I haven't, but I heard he scored 45.
I was his assistant coach this year. Yeah. He takes about 400 shots a day in the summertime.
Love it.
That's all he does.
I'm feeling good now.
He was a McDonald's All-Star this year.
Yeah.
Charles, what do you think? If you can't pronounce the last name, should he get the pick or what?
I just want Ryan to reveal which one of his sources gave him that name. That's impressive homework.
Fort Kent kind of fell off the map a little bit, for a little while, and I know they came back the last couple of years, and I was actually paying attention to their run this year, so I noticed the name come up a lot. So
you missed my era when we fell off the map. You didn't get to see me.
Did I say that? No. Yeah. I think 1997 through like 2004 is a blur for me.
Yeah.
We are back to Charles for your fourth pick. Just to recap so far, J.R. Boucher, Anthony Lamar, Joey Bard.
Here we go. This guy was high on everybody else's list. I'm still glad he's out there. Never got to see him play in his prime. Maybe a couple men's league games here and there. May he rest in peace also, but I'm going Glenn Lamar.
So you're going father-son combination.
Going, Charlie.
Say it again, Coach.
You got a father and son thing going.
A father.
Good. Anyone seen him in his prime?
I saw him in his prime. Played against him. He's an athlete.
Better than Anthony, or
almost the same guy.
I'll take it.
The same guy. Yeah.
And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with Tommy and Glenn, they were teammates, right? And weren't they like the Michael and Scotty? They were the duo at the time.
Yeah. Glenn was very, very athletic, like Anthony. A lot of hops, left-handed, hard worker, talented player. Nice man.
Definitely.
Great pick, Charlie. I like that. I've heard his name a lot as well. We're going back to Paul for your fourth pick. Just to recap: Steve Farrow, Chris Lozier, Tommy Pelletier. Where are we going now? How do you top?
Again, I'm going to be going kind of with some of the retro names, and this guy was someone. One of my most vivid memories was I think it was his 18th birthday, hosting Van Buren in Fort Kent. And Matt Rosignol came to town. So you can imagine there were signs, and of course the gym was packed, and happy birthday. And I've already given Corey some loving, but there's no doubt. I thought Roderick Thibodeau was a player. He was a hustler, intense, got up and down. Ryan Knows up in the St. Francis, St. John area. Rod Thibodeau.
Happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And we're staying with Paul. We're going to go right to your 5th pick as well here.
Sure. And again, someone that maybe you don't hear a lot of, but this guy was extremely talented, super athlete on the soccer field, on the tennis courts. He actually taught me, I want to say it might have been biology. He came in as a teacher at the University of Maine, Orono, when I was there. And because he came in and he became my professor, it was probably one of the few classes I went to through my years there. He's a chassis that you sometimes don't hear about because he didn't play in the Hack League, but Kevin Chassis.
Kevin Chassis. Does anyone have any insight on Kevin Chassis? Are we just making up names now, or can we confirm this?
Kevin Chassis is a real person. He
Okay.
did play. He's in that family of Carl and Dan and the son. I think Carl's son. But no, Kevin Chassis, good player, good skills.
Okay. So just to recap for Team Paul so far: Steve Perro, Chris Lozier, Tommy Pelletier, Roderick Thibodeau, and Kevin Chassis. Charlie, back on the clock here. Recap for you. You got J.R. Bushi, Anthony Lamar, Joey Bard, Glenn Lamar. You got father-son combo. You gonna pick up little brother Sam here or what?
I was gonna think about creating controversy and picking Sam over you, but I won't do it. I won't do it tonight here. I'm gonna go with the next. Ooh, this is a good pick still on the board. Athletic is an understatement. Never reached his full potential in high school, but a high flyer. You guys played with his older brother, but I'm going with Ben Raymond.
Ben Raymond, okay. And Coach, I think you had Ben Raymond for a little bit, right?
Yeah, as a youngster, and he was a high flyer. He's very athletic. Another one of those lefties. How come lefties are so hard to guard? What is it with that? You know. But no, Ben, and a nice young man. Kind of had to be told sometimes to be more aggressive on the court. He was maybe too unselfish at times. But no, very athletic, very skilled, hard worker.
And Charles, Ben's pretty much right down the road from you. Did that go into your thought process when picking him tonight? Did he come to your door and say, pick me, or what?
Well, no, with the lockdown, I got at least a month where I'm safe if I wouldn't have picked him. So I knew he wouldn't be knocking at my door. But no, we're good friends. We stay in touch. We see each other. He's got 2 young daughters. I got 2 young daughters, so we see each other a lot. So it's good to have some local faces around. So he's a good friend of mine.
Hey, Charles.
Yeah,
Say hi to him for me, would you?
absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll do.
The same, Charles, the same.
For sure. We can line this up. Anybody that wants to talk to anybody, Tom can make it happen. So throw some ideas Tom's way and we'll make it happen.
Looking for content all the time.
Yeah.
Next, we got Ryan up back on the board with your 5th pick. Just to recap: Corey Thibodeau, Jason Neto, Mitch Willett, Jason Rochelo. You got 2 1,000-point scorers. You got a man who went and played well at St. Joe's. You got a knockdown shooter in Jason. Where are we going with the 5th pick here?
So, my strategy at first was to go with best available, but as I see my team forming, I've got my big guy, I've got my power forward, I've got my shooter, I've got my scoring point guard. I'm going with, this might surprise a lot of guys. This guy was a spark plug from my era. I know my junior year, he would come off the bench and light a fire out under anybody with his defensive play. I'm going with Chad Tardy as my defensive stopper.
Can you repeat that name?
Chad Tardy.
Thank you.
Coach Murph, thoughts on Chad Tardy?
Chad Tardy, unbelievable energy. Literally, I couldn't believe it, but Coach Lauren Gee and I were watching one night, and we had to look at each other. He was guarding player A, who passed to player B, and he intercepted player A's pass. He deflected it, stole it, and scored it. And he actually came into a game against Presque Isle, and he had guards and people looking like this. Where is he? He was a Tasmanian devil. I have never seen somebody with so much energy in my life as Chad Tardy.
I'm going to give some go ahead, Coach. You finish.
we have a hustle chart. We took pride in having a hustle chart. It's all the things that I feel are important to showing energy and hard work. And we named that hustle chart after his career. We named it the Tardy chart because he would fill up the hustle chart with the turnovers, the loose ball recoveries, the tie-ups, the defensive boards, the back tips. I mean, crazy energy.
Charles,
I'll
what
jump
are you
in
doing?
there too. So as a youngster, I looked up to the four of you guys on the screen here today, and I'll never forget your tournament run. There was a front page photo of Chad Tardy going in for a rebound, or I don't believe rebound.
Layup.
It was a
Layup?
breakaway layup.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, iconic photo. I wish if anybody has that right there in their scrapbook, put that on the screen because iconic photo.
A quick story about Chad. We're down in Millinocket in a preseason tournament, and I don't know, Ryan, if you remember this or not, right? And Chad broke all the rules. Like he wasn't where he was supposed to be. He didn't get into a good stance. He always overcommitted. He used his hands too much. He broke all the rules, but he was so damn quick. So he was driving me nuts, and I said to my assistant coach, what do we do? He says, well, let him play with a group of guys. Let him play with the first team and see what happens if he plays with a bunch of guys that can play. And so we put him in the game, and we played him. We rotated him in, and he ended up with the first team. So he gets a steal, dribbles from midcourt. He makes a steal at midcourt, dribbles down, and dunks the ball at 5'11". I turned and looked at Wade, and I said, did you know he could dunk? He says, no. I said, Chad, what's up with that? And he goes, I thought I'd try it.
Wow.
And he dunked
That's how it
the
usually
ball.
happens.
Dunked the ball. I mean,
Awesome.
and you remember that, Ryan, huh?
Oh yeah.
And there were the old geezers up in the stands that were watching the game and kind of falling asleep. And then this 5'11" guy goes in, skinny as a rail, jumps, dunks it easily, and comes trotting back and mean face, plays defense, gets ready to go again.
Yeah.
Nice.
Also, a great name drop right there. Shout out to Wado, right?
Yeah, Wado, yeah.
He was my next pick.
All right. So Lon, you get we got one more pick here for everyone to have their fifth pick. So Lon, just to recap, Travis Delisle, Steve Jalbert, Brent Marquis, Kerry Michaud. From what I can see, not very big, right? I mean, I don't know all these names, but not very big so far. Curious where you're going with the fifth pick.
See, you might look at that lineup and say not big, but I'm not worried about the boards. Between Jalbert, Delisle, and Kerry Michaud, we're tough, we're athletic, we're quick. Those guys can guard on the perimeter and they can get up to the rim. So I'm not worried about rebounding. I'm going sort of like the Chad Tardy pick. I'm going with a defensive stopper, and so like. This guy was the Marcus Smart of his era. Like Marcus Smart, you think of Marcus Smart now, where he does all the dirty work all the time, and he takes charges, and he lets those other guys that are the scorers do what they do, and he doesn't care, right? And since Corey Thibodeau is on Ryan's team, this is the guy that knows all his moves, can shut him down, no problem. I'm going with Gary Thibodeau.
Ooh.
He's too small.
Hey, Gary was a teammate with Tommy and Glenn, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so Gary knew what he was doing, and again, he grew up in that Thibodeau family where they all kind of beat on each other, and
Defensive stopper.
yeah, hey.
Well, you've got three Thibodeaus already on the board right now. That's an impressive family right there.
Yeah.
This is more than the Hack League
The
draft.
Marcus might be getting jealous. The Marcus up in St. Francis may be getting jealous.
And real quick, just shout out to Gary Tibbs, who was an intense figure on the sidelines in that St. Francis in the cage back in the day in middle school. Great coach as well. So just to recap, Team Lon, Travis Delisle, Steve Jalbert, Brent Marquis, Kerry Michaud, Gary Thibodeau. You guys have one more pick, your sixth man. Before we do that, though, we're going to go around the horn here. I just want to pick your guys' brains here. So obviously this group spans a great time in Fort Kent basketball. Maybe not so much for Charles, no offense, but, we've talked about it. It's all right. Just want to go around and try to get maybe one moment or one game, one incident that kind of sticks out from your guys' mind, from your time, from when you played. We'll start with Lon. Like thinking back on your days, I mean, you got the jacket on right now. What's a moment, a game, a teammate? What stands out in your mind?
There were a couple games, so I'm going to kind of cheat and go with a couple. But we hadn't made the tournament in a long, long time. I couldn't remember the last time Fort Kent had made the tournament, and we had to win our last game of the season to get into the tournament. And so we were playing Holton at home, and we won that game in overtime, and we got a chance to get to the auditorium. And I just remember having on my sneakers, on the toes on my sneakers, Bangor bound, so that when I was going to shoot a free throw, that it was something that we were looking forward to. So that was one game that sticks out. But another game that sticks out for me is we got a chance to go to the auditorium and win a game. We had gone a couple years and we hadn't won, and we got in, and we were I think we were the 4th seed that year, and we beat Ellsworth in a very tight game at the Bangor Auditorium, and so that one was a pretty special game.
How about you, Paul?
Like Laughn, many great memories. I guess I'm gonna steal 2 as well. We played against, in my era, there was some really, really talented teams. The Prescal teams, Caribou teams were teams that were playing for state championships regularly. Calais was loaded when we were younger. Calais had Arnie Clark on the sidelines, tremendous coach. Bobby Campbell was a couple of times, in the McDonald, well, not McDonald's, Bangor Daily teams. Joey Clark, they had a 6'11" kid, I can't remember. Very, very good. And I remember Calais, of course, back then we would go down and play Calais twice. We'd play them on Friday, stay over, and then play them again on Saturday. The year afterwards, they were still very, very good. They came up to Fort Kent. We played them Friday night, and my junior year, and we dropped like 30. I think it was 32 to 15 at the end of the first quarter. We hit everything. We played well, and we just kind of, I think at that point we made our mark that that Fort Kent basketball was pretty competitive. The other game was is actually didn't happen in the game. It was afterwards. The Limestone teams were unbelievable back then as well, and I know they were in your eras too. But Limestone with the base, and there was the Troy Barnes and some of those guys. They were unbelievable, athletic, 6'6", 6'8". I think everyone on their starting 5 was taller than us. We didn't beat them that year, but the following year, up down in Limestone, we won. And the celebration in the locker room afterwards was one that you read about. It was Sean Thibodeau again, one of those guys, just was kind of the court jester, running around in the locker room. Their coach came in to congratulate us afterwards. Of course, not everyone had their clothes on at that time, and we were just simply goofing around. So those are some of the things I think about and remember, just the good times.
All right, Ryan, we're going to go to you, but I'm thinking it's Caribou. I'm thinking it's a game in Caribou that happened, which, just for everyone watching that game, we have it up on our YouTube channel. We got the game winner on the YouTube channel, but is it that game, or is it something else that sticks out for you?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I can just pick one. Obviously, I played in a lot of great games over, and I could actually think of one game each year of my career, right? I think, obviously the Caribou game was probably at the top. Obviously playing against a Class A school, a rival, a team that we really didn't beat a lot, over my career and over Lawn's career. Being down 18 at half, which seems like insurmountable in a high school game when you're playing 8-minute quarters. I would say that probably is at the top. And then winning the way we did, obviously, I think was obviously really fun on their home court.
Hey, you can tell how you won. Go ahead.
No,
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Watch it. Obviously the tournament games are special, like Laughn said. I mean, obviously playing on the, Bangor Auditorium is like nothing else you'll ever experience if you ever grew up in Maine. Those wins were awesome. The losses really sucked because I feel like, we underachieved. Obviously it's, everyone's Uncle Rico, they have their own moments. So, but going back to my freshman year, I think Limestone was huge. I actually remember practicing for those games. Like the Limestone game, I remember the practice the day before when we ran ice, when we were up, 101 to 98 or whatever it was. The year that, Limestone might have won the state championship that year with Tony Tobin. And then obviously sophomore year is Presque Isle, because, playing against Presque Isle and Caribou were big for us, obviously, because they were always really tough teams. Really hard wins to come by. And then, junior year beating Chris Funk and Caribou for the first time, I think, ever. In overtime was another one for me. So I know I got a lot. There's not one specific one that stands out, but they were all good.
Hey, those two that you mentioned, Limestone and Presque Isle, those are right there with me too. Those were excellent games. Great picks.
Yeah.
Charles, how about you? Curious where you're going with this.
I'm going to back it up even further than that. So my journey starts as say it again.
You're going to the rec department days, aren't you?
I am, but I'll keep it clean here now. Just picture a young 6-7-year-old Charlie Bard running around the field, man, looking up to the likes of Paul Marquis, Laughn Berthiaume. Ryan, I don't think you did the rec program. Am I wrong?
Oh, yeah. I was part of the rec program.
Okay. My memory is hazy. Work with me here, so I apologize.
Ask Paul.
But yeah, you tell me that fast forward 20 to 25, 30 years later, I'd be sitting in a chat room with these 4 gentlemen, man. You can't tell a young kid that that's anything that would ever happen. So I'm just so fortunate to be sitting here with these guys. As a young man, I used to travel to every tournament game with my grandmother, who's passed away. Her and I were very close. So it was I would travel with Pat Vizin and Jean Vizin, Matt Thibodeau's parents.
Matt's parents, yeah.
That would be the 4 of us. We'd go down. We never missed a tournament, guys. So when Laughn and Ryan were playing down there, I never missed a game. So you guys were a huge influence in my life. So thanks for everything. I'm very honored to be here. Coach Murphy, I've had you as a basketball coach and a soccer coach, and man, your resume speaks for itself. You guys have all been inspirational and a huge influence. So just thanks for letting me be here. Really.
All right. So, Coach Murph, you said that you could touch on the on Ryan and the Caribou game.
There's two tidbits to Ryan's Caribou game. Number one, we were down 17 at halftime, and we had a little talk at halftime. And we would have wiped out the 17-point lead in the third quarter alone had we not turned our last 2 possessions over. But we cut it down from 17 to 6 at the close of 3. The other little tidbit is the scoreboard had us up 1 point when we were actually still tied. And we were under 10 seconds in the backcourt, and John Lozier was doing the smart thing if he had a 1-point lead. He was just protecting the basketball and waiting for a foul to come. Ryan ran up, ripped the ball out of his hands, dribbled up the court and took that 3-point shot from the corner that hit nothing but net. And then the celebration started. But so the whole thing was Ryan knew we were tied. I knew we were tied. Lots of other people thought we were up 1. Even my wife and I had a fight when we got home. She said, "You're up 1. What was all the heroics about? What was all that drama about?" And I said, "We weren't up 1. It was tied." And I said, "I'm glad Ryan realized that, because he literally went up, yanked it out of Johnny's hands, dribbled to the corner, shot the 3 and scored." And the last piece of that with talking about Caribou, we, in 3 years, in 6 games, that game there ended in regulation. The 5 previous games all went to overtime.
Wow.
3 years of overtimes and then a 3-point closer at the buzzer.
Well, the funny story about that Caribou game too, I remember I actually turned the ball over with 20 seconds to go. We were up 2.
Fell down. You fell down.
Yeah, and instead of waiting to get fouled, I tried to dribble it out, and I slipped and fell and lost the ball. So I was pissed. One, so that's why I ripped the ball out of John's hand. Second, if you watch that game, I think Corey might have been wide open under the basket, but I wasn't giving it.
He would have had 1 rebound, 1 assist, and 2 points.
Yeah, and the buzzer would have went off too soon.
Like I said, that game, we have it up on the YouTube channel, so we're gonna repost it after this, just so you guys can go back and watch. It's big time. Before we get to the last picks, I wanna see how good Coach Murph's memory is. So we have 2 1,000-point scores. So, Coach, I'm gonna ask you what Ryan scored his 1,000 point on and what Laughn scored his 1,000 point on, and we'll ask him afterwards if you got it right. So, how do you remember how Ryan scored his 1,000 point?
You know what? I'm almost embarrassed to say that I don't know either one of those answers, because both those guys never made that a priority. Both those guys played, and when it happened, and then we went on with business, and that made me quite proud. Ryan spent a lot of fourth quarters sitting on the bench when maybe coach could have played him 3 more minutes, 4 more minutes. Lonnie got his 1,000. I really don't know, because our whole objective each time was the game at hand, the situation at hand. And both those boys are honorable for not making that what they wanted to accomplish, but more what they wanted for the team to accomplish.
I bet you they remember those. So Ryan, how'd you score your 1,000 point?
How did I score it? That's a
Yeah.
good question. Shit. I do remember what day I scored it on, because
I like it.
the funny story is Laughn and I scored our 1,000th 1 year apart exactly. So for the last 20 plus years, I get a text from Laughn on January 24th. And he's like, happy 1,000 point anniversary. So I think I scored it against Caribou on I assume like a floater in the lane. I don't really recall. It's probably on tape somewhere.
How about you, Lon? You remember?
All right, so I guess I have a better memory than both of these guys. True story that I do text Ryan every January 24th and I say happy anniversary. You know, unfortunately, every once in a while I miss my own and I have to apologize to my wife, but I don't think I missed Ryan's anniversary for a while. All right, so the funny story. So we had played Caribou and Presque Isle back to back. We played Presque Isle first. That was the game Ryan was talking about. We beat Presque Isle at home in overtime, and I had needed whatever I had needed to get to 1,000. I had scored all but 4 in that game, and so we were playing Caribou the next game at home. And I had a good friend that played for Caribou. His name's Eric Salmonen. We had gone on a soccer tour together in Europe the year before. We were teammates there, and so we were really good friends. And he was their defensive guy. He was their defensive stopper, and I only needed 4. And so the night before, this was a time there was no cell phones, no texting. So I called his house the night before, and I asked his father if I could speak to Eric. And when Eric got on the phone, I told him that I was going to score my 1,000th point tomorrow in his face, and then I hung up the phone. But my 1,000th point was scored on a 3-pointer, and it was with him guarding me, and I still remind him about that today.
I like that. Was it from the Indian head? That was the thing back in the day. The Indian head on the court.
Yeah. So this one was sort of in front of the on the girls' side of the gym, close to their bench. So yeah, it was on that side of the court.
All right. So we got to get to our final picks here. You guys have one more pick, and we're going to determine the winner, and then we'll do something fun before we get up out of here. So we're back to Laughn. Just to recap, so far, Travis Delisle, Steve Jalbert, Brent Marquis, Kenny Michaud, Gary Thibodeau. Where are you going with the 6th pick?
All right. So I'm going with a scorer, and this is a guy that is a young guy. I know all the drills that he was put through in the driveway by his father.
I already know where you're going.
1,000-point scorer, McDonald's All-Star. I'm going with Caleb Delisle.
All right. 2 Delisles on your team. Is that gonna affect
Other
chemistry?
father-son team.
See, you know what? Caleb's actually. I got a chance to meet him at the McDonald's All-Star game a couple of years ago. You know, I got my picture taken with him, and I congratulated him. And he's a mild-mannered guy. He's probably the son that would take the direction from his father a little bit better than the middle son. Austin's probably got a little middle child syndrome like myself. I think Caleb, in my opinion, just from a short time I've talked to him and known the family, I bet he'd take Travis's direction pretty well.
All right.
What do you think, Murph? Is that true or false?
You nailed it. Travis often compares Caleb and Aaron Berthiaume and Laughn and Austin Delisle. Caleb and Aaron, receptive to coaching from dad, patient with dad. Laughn and Osti, they accept the coaching, not really patient sometimes, a bit stubborn at other times. So yeah, he's made that same comparison to me several times before. Yeah.
All right. Ryan, we're back to you. Your last pick. Just to recap: Corey Thibodeau, Jason Neto, Mitch Willett, Jace Rochelot, Chad Tardy. You got a little bit of everything. You got, I think, just looking the most well-rounded team, I think, in my opinion, so far. Where are you going with the 6th pick?
So it's fortunate that Laughn had that pick, because he was going to be my next pick, and I think I would have closed it out at that point. You know, I still have got a couple of guys on the board, and this one's tough. Obviously, the last pick is the toughest. I'm going to go with a guy. Man, this one's tough. So I've got my center, I've got my power forward, I've got my defensive stopper, I've got my point, I've got my shooter. I'm going to go with a guy that actually played with, another guy that played way bigger than what he was. He had the porn stash in 6th grade, and I think Lon knows where I'm going. So I'm going to go with Brad Courier, another guy who was a 5'11" center, but he was a Dennis Rodman. He was a tough guy, played way bigger than what he was. So I'm going to go with Brad to round it out.
He was a 5'11" center in 5th grade.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
He never grew another inch.
I think Brad might be the most mentioned person on Big Time podcast history. I think his name comes up, I think, almost every episode. It's crazy. Maybe we should get Brad on the podcast here at some point.
Because he was buying people beer when he was in 6th grade. Everyone's going to give him some respect.
Charlito, one more pick just to recap. You got J.R. Boucher, Anthony Lamar, Joey Bard, Glenn Lamar, Ben Raymond. Last
I
pick.
don't know how that's not the best 5 out there, and I'm feeling confident here tonight. I'm going to go one of 2 ways. I'm either going to throw a sympathy vote and just pick up Lucas Slovak because he's probably crying at home right now. Or I'm probably going to go with a individual that Tom's probably going to have to give the summary on this fella because I don't know if you guys ever seen this guy play, but I'm going to go with Seth Rivera as point guard.
Okay.
You guys
Teammate
know
of
Seth?
mine, 6'3" point guard, out of New York. All kinds of handles, all kinds of length. Couldn't quite shoot, but a matchup nightmare. So great pick. Shout out to Seth.
How about the other guys? You ever seen Seth play?
I know who Seth is, and I haven't seen him play a ton. I know exactly who you're talking about, but I was wondering who was going to bring the ball up the court for you guys because you were like a full court press nightmare waiting to happen.
Listen, for the Hackley draft, I went with my dad and Lance Martin. I didn't want to go with those 2 again tonight here, so I had to mix it up.
I kind of Charlie's got Ben Raymond could handle, Anthony Lamar could handle. Now he's got Seth Rivera. Charlie's stacking it right now. He's getting it.
Don't forget my dad. He thinks he can handle it to this day, even.
Yeah, well, we'll hope he learns from this.
We got one more pick to go in the fantasy draft here. We got Paul on the clock. Just to recap: Steve Farrow, Chris Lozier, Tommy Pelletier, Roderick Thibodeau, Kevin Chassie. Your last pick, Paul. Where are you going with this one?
Well, this is, I didn't really do all the research that Charlito did. I think certainly you got to give him all the credit in the world. But the people that I did talk to were more around my generation. One of the guys I did talk to was my old man. He's now retired down in Pinehurst, North Carolina. And of course, with this quarantine, keeping chatting with him daily, really. He tells me he was very good. He tells me, averaging 17 points, 18 rebounds, both his junior and senior year. He also mentioned a part of that was because John Libby would shoot it about 40 times. And again, Murph might know some of these names. John Libby was a tremendous player. Of course, he went to Madawaska his senior year, and that automatically disqualifies him from any kind of selections in Fort Kent. But I'm not going to pick my dad. I'm going to, when you get to my age and you start reminiscing about the things that you remember about growing up in the times, and I still talk about this to my athletes nowadays. It's different in the southern part of the state. Fortunately, we've had some really good success in a lot of the teams that I've coached, and we've had some great followings and fan support. But I don't know that it was like what it's always been in Aroostook County, and I'm sure still is. Boy, I remember going into the gym and it was packed, and the pep band was playing, and Corey Gagne was going crazy on the drums. That was before his brother, and Corey was. I just was in the zone when I heard Corey just jamming out to Wipeout back in the day. But another thing I remember were all the guys sitting around in the chairs around the court. The Dr. Alberts, the Dr. Chassies. I picked a couple of those guys already. Chassies, Elmer, Dr. Pelletier, and that's where I'm going to go again. Dr. Johnson's, who was always on the sideline as well. Peter Johnson. Yeah, Peter Johnson was a tremendous. So Pete Johnson's my last pick.
Great pick.
Coach, you sound happy with that. Can you give us some feedback on Pete Johnson?
Peter Johnson is about 6'4", and he was really athletic. And I don't know if you recall when Hyde, the private school Hyde, was coming to play in Fort Kent with a group of boys out of Cleveland, the city of Cleveland. And to be honest, Peter was the only guy that could maybe play with them or be on their team. And a hell of a soccer player as well. But 6'4", real agile, real hardworking, decent shot, and good footwork. And I had him down here as a starred oldie. And Paul come up with him on the last pick.
I will say that Robert Plord Fudge submitted his list and had Peter Johnson at the top of his list too. So
Yeah.
I had Peter Johnson on my list too as a guy that was mentioned.
I took a chance. I thought he was a high pick, but I was hoping that maybe I could slide him under the radar. I don't know if he'd be my sixth man. He may very well crack the starting lineup on my team, but I like where my team is.
Up until that pick, Paul, you had a positionless basketball team. You realize that, right? You had 5 perimeter players there. You would have
I had a pretty good. I had
I go 4 out, 1 in.
I had a pretty good run this year with a bunch of athletes in York, and when you look at some of the best players that's ever come out of Fort Kent, Ryan, Lonnie, Tommy. I mean, whether it's picking best available, I think there's a heck of a lot of athletes on my team, and certainly Pete fills that need.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So
I gotta say this too. I think with the guys that I've researched and have on my list, we could go 10 deep, and there's a lot of guys not mentioned. This is fun. I think every team is solid top to bottom.
you guys want to go one? You guys want to go one more pick?
I'm down.
I mean, we can go another pick if you need to. I was just mentioning that I thought every team was pretty stacked at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna quit while
We're doing decent on time. You know what? Let's make one more pick here. So snake draft rules continue. So Paul, you're back on the clock. And I'm curious that Peter Johnson pick, Murph lit right up. I'm wondering if you're just trying to buy off the judge here, if you're just going for nostalgia and just trying to please the judge.
Maybe it's a little bit of that, but Murph didn't get it. I mean, Murph had some fantastic teams, and certainly one of, if not the best coaches that Fort Kent's ever seen. So when he says it's a good pick, you know that you're doing something right. So no, not trying to buy him off. Just I think I know where talent lies.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to go one more pick each. So Paul, back to you.
Since we're going a little off the format, then I think this pick fits in perfectly. This was a pick I was considering for my era. You know, I think again when you look at a coach on the floor, and Lonnie knows. I mean, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. I've been fortunate to have some tremendous assistant coaches and people work with me, and I count Lonnie as one of those, and I learned a lot from him. And I'm sure Lonnie's continuing to learn a lot from this basketball player. If I'm going to go for my 7th pick, I'm going Neely Joler, Neely Nelson. I think Neely can certainly play on this team. She's a St. Joe's girl as well, Ryan, and you know she's won some state championships down in Gorham. And boy, she was as much a competitor as any of these other tough-nosed guys as well.
Shout out to Neely, also a podcast. Although we had her on the show as well. So shout out to Neely. Great pick. Wow.
Great pick, but I had a lot of people wanting to submit ladies' names too. So you're gonna have to alter the title of this one. But Neely Joler, she deserves it.
All right.
100%.
So
Well, since we're going off the top, I can go other directions. If Charlie, if you if I'm cramping the style.
According to the rule book, according to Section C here.
Well,
So,
Lonnie and I have both coached girls basketball for quite some time, and we know there's a lot of similarities. There's certainly a few differences, but a basketball player is a basketball player, and there have been a lot in Fort Kent. You know, you look at the teams that Terry Carpenter had, Stephanie Karen. You know, we talk about the Martins from St. Francis, but you know, Alton but Bonita was amazing as well in my time. So yeah, a lot of great lady players.
So if we all get together again and do a ladies draft, you cannot choose Neely because you've already utilized your Neely Joler pick, Paul.
all right, Charles, you're back up, Charles.
I'm back up. I'm actually going to go. This gentleman has been on board with supplying me with the most names through this process. He's very supportive. He's got some nice words to say about this whole process. So I'm going to give some love to Bob Perrin right now. He's loving the podcast, and I got to give it to him right now.
Bob Parent, great pick. I remember him from men's league. Murph, do you have any thoughts on Bob Parent?
Bobby Parent played soccer for me in college. I watched him play high school basketball. He's really athletic. He's a smart player, good defender, good all-around player. Nice pick.
Good
Nice
work,
pick.
Charles. Back to Ryan, 7th pick.
So Paul threw a wrench in this thing. So are females available now? Because
I guess so. We're off the rails right now. So
It's not quite as unique anymore, Ryan. I don't know, but
telling you what, since I can't get Tom, I'm going with the next best thing. I'm gonna pick Heather Peletier. Again from my era.
Wow.
that's another name. Hey, Lon, I'm going to have to talk to you because I've tried to get Heather on here before and she's declined. So maybe you can work that for me next. But
Hey, you know what? If you can get Ryan to actually do his solo podcast, I'm going to be 100%. So I'll give it a shot.
all right, you heard it right there, Ryan. We got to make this happen, Ryan. Back to Lon, your last pick, number 7.
All right. So a couple things before I make my last picks. Bob Parent played for you in soccer, Murph. How the hell old are you?
Almost 70.
Yeah.
Really?
And honestly, the Neely pick is a fantastic pick. Again, blindsided me too. If I knew that was on the board, I might have picked her earlier. So Neely and I and my older brother's big group of friends always used to play pickup ball together. And a lot of times it was me and Neely against any two of them. And we were just fine. We were undersized a little bit, but both competitive, and we could compete in anything. And her daughter this year is a sophomore on my team, and actually was made the all-conference rookie team. And there's a lot of similarities between her daughter and Neely. So
You can't draft her though. You can't draft her. She didn't go to Fort Kent, so I don't know where you're going with this.
No, I'm not drafting her. I'm just
All right.
just giving a little mention to Anna Nelson. This pick's an easy one for me, actually. Again, you talk about how you grew up and how you learned the game and who taught you things along the way. I'm going with a guy that's going to do the little things to help you win. Doesn't need to be flashy. Doesn't need a score. But again, if you said, hey, this is your job for the game, you got to go out and you got to do this, he's going to do it. I'm going with Laughn Berthiaume.
All right. All right, so I'm going to recap these teams here for Coach, so he can kind of start to think about where he wants to go for tonight's victor. We're going to give him a couple moments, and we'll do a little thing to kill some time here while he thinks about it. So just to recap, Team Paul, we got Steve Perro, Chris Lozier, Tommy Pelletier, Roderick Thibodeau, Kevin Chassie, Peter Johnson, Neely Joler Nelson. Team Lawn, we got Travis Delisle, Steve Jalbert, Brent Marquis, Kerry Michaud, Gary Thibodeau, Caleb Delisle, Laughn Berthiaume. Team Ryan, we got Corey Thibodeau, Jason Neto, Mitch Willett, Jace Rochelot, Chad Tardy, Brad Courier, and Heather Pelletier. Actually, it's not Heather Pelletier anymore. What is it? Heather Ornelius? Heather
Ornelas, I think.
Ornelas?
Sounds about right.
Team Charlito, we got J.R. Boucher, Anthony Lamar, Joey Bard, Glenn Lamar, Ben Raymond, Seth Rivera, Bob Parent. No brothers though, Charles. Little surprise there, but it's all right. It's all right. So Murph, we're gonna give you a chance to think about that, and while you think about it, we're gonna go around the horn and give our guys one last chance to butter you up. So Paul Marquis, your thoughts on Coach Murph and what kind of influence he's been in your life?
Wow. Well, obviously you as a coach or an educator in any arena, really, you take the little bits and pieces that you can, whether it's some of the good and some of the bad. And I've had some coaches that I've learned maybe things that I would prefer not to do, and some things that I try to continue to do even to this day. Coach Murphy was someone that I I was a youngster when he was coaching at the collegiate level, and growing through that time period. And I always had the highest level of respect for what he was doing at that level, what he was putting out on the floor, the kids and the types of kids he was recruiting. There's a connection between Coach Murphy and my family as well. My father coached at Allagash, and when you talk about all the tremendous athletes in such a small town and small school that was in Allagash, the girls teams my dad had, the boys teams that he had, Coach Murphy followed him, and the teams that he had there. And then my dad did the same thing, coached at UMFK, and Coach Murphy, I think, followed there. Might have been right after, I'm not sure.
We were together for a while there.
Was it? Okay, yeah. But I remember going into the gym, and he was always so accommodating. He wanted to see the young kids. He wanted to see, whether it was in 4th, 5th grade, try to get in and get some shots up. He and Bouchard, was it Norm Bouchard? Norm Bouchard was always someone that we could count on to get us into UMFK and shoot around. And we were gym rats back then, and Coach Murphy was someone that supported that. And I have the highest level of respect for him and what he's done, and it's refreshing. There's a friend of his and someone that is a resident of York now, and we actually had an opportunity to catch up. And when he told me that Murph was back into coaching up in Fort Kent this year, those are the things that you're excited to see someone giving back even some more.
All right, Laughn, your chance to either butter coach up or just say some kind words.
You know what? I think when you get into coaching, when you're young and you're into coaching and you think that the game is about winning and losing and drawing up the great play in a timeout, I think it's a little short-sighted. I mean, as you get a little bit older and you've had some experience, you realize that the whole coaching aspect isn't necessarily about the wins and losses, although you try to win all the time and you try to do things the right way. And then you come to realize that it's about the impact that you're able to make on people in their lives. And I think the measure for me of a successful coach is when you get the opportunities to see how you've impacted other people's lives. I think that's the real measure. And so for Coach Murph, I mean, he's a guy that I keep in touch with to this day. He shows up at my playoff games. We text, we talk on the phone. I mean, I still, we talked about that game, or Ryan mentioned it a little bit earlier. We talked about that game against Limestone where we decided to run ice, which is a bit of a stall action play to get people to foul you and make some free throws. And I have that with my team. I mean, I run some of the things that he taught me, and, we discuss those things. And so I'm fortunate for those relationships that I'm able to make. And so to me, the biggest thing that he taught me was that athletics and coaching is about the relationships you get an opportunity to make and the impact you get to make on people's lives. So, I'm very appreciative that he's been a mentor of mine, not only when I was playing, but for my lifetime.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, your turn here. Obviously, not a high school basketball coach like the previous two guys, but I'm guessing Coach Murph has had a lasting impact on you as well. So just curious, your thoughts here.
No, definitely. I mean, I echo, everything that Paul and Laughn just said. Learned a ton. Obviously, coming, I got to play for Murph for 4 years. Not a lot of guys can say that they had that relationship. Coming out of junior high into the high school world, it's huge change, right? It's big time at that point, and obviously Murph, gave me that opportunity. He took, I don't want to take a chance, but the fact that if you look back at myself and Corey coming in as freshmen, he took a chance on us. He put us in the starting lineup right away, and I think that was the best thing he could have done for me personally in my career. I was one of those guys that never really had, it's weird to say, like, the confidence that I needed, and I think him kind of pushing me in my younger years kind of propelled my career, so to speak. And he was a firm but fair coach. Obviously, he really cared about you. He wanted to see you develop. The one thing I'll always remember, funny story, my freshman year, Ron probably remembers this story, but we were playing up in Van Buren, and we were from Kent, obviously.
I know what story he's talking about.
We we're supposed to win that game, and I think it was might have been tied up with 10 seconds to go, and I had the ball, and I tried to dribble around. I can't remember. I think I remember the guy's name, but he kind of picked me from behind and stole the ball. They scored, and we lost the game. Next practice, for the first 30 minutes, he had me doing dribbling drills up and down the sideline, I think, for at least the first 30 minutes, while everyone else was kind of doing warm-ups. And I'll never forget that to this day because, you know, as a young kid, it's devastating to you as a freshman to lose a game that way. But to this day, I'll remember those things, you know. So it's things like that that kind of help mold me, you know, not only as a basketball player, but as a person as well. So much love. I don't talk to him enough, obviously, to this day. It's been a long time. Obviously, moving away, you know, it's a little bit harder, but I'm coming home next month. Hopefully we can catch up if we're out of quarantine.
I hope so. I hope so.
All right, Charles. So you only had Murph for maybe a year in high school for basketball, but you obviously had him in college. So your thoughts before we get Murph's decision here.
I'll start off by saying he's not going to like this comment, but he's like the Bill Belichick of Fort Kent. No, I'm so glad that he persevered and stayed with the program. I mean, to go with these guys in the 90s through the trials and tribulations of the early 2000s. I mean, you guys probably don't know this, but Murphy used to go home and cut firewood after our basketball games to the wee hours of the morning. I think he needed another release, so we got into dog sledding. I mean, this is all our fault. Sorry, guys. We failed tradition for sure, but I know between high school and college, you were always there. Your message stayed the same. You were a motivator, just an easy person to talk to. You pretty much convinced me to go to Fort Kent because as a youngster coming out of high school, you don't know what you want to do. We had some good conversations. You said, come play soccer for me here, and the rest is history, I'd like to say. So, yeah, thanks to everybody out here. Coach Murphy, you're going to have a word to say. And after this, let's give Tom some shine, too. I know Tom didn't want anybody else in this room other than these four right here. This is big to Tom, too. So let's give him some love after Coach Murphy speaks here for sure.
All right, Coach, your turn. I'm going to let you either just comment on the guys on the panel here or anything you want to say before we get your final verdict.
I'm going to comment a little bit and say thank you to everybody for the kind words. The coaching, I think Lonnie put it best. The coaching, I've coached a lot of teams in a lot of sports. And the most rewarding piece of it is the invitations to weddings, the announcements of childbirths, the ask you to be a part of their wedding, the relationships. Coaches never get paid enough for what they do if they do it right. And I'm a blessed man. I'm looking at four faces right here, and I'm a blessed man. I'm 4 times whatever hundreds of people that are out there. I love my coaching, and I love everybody I've ever coached.
Absolutely.
Okay, you got me emotional here, so.
All right. So before we get Murph's final decision, just to echo Charles, this is big time here. You know, I didn't get to see Paul play back in the day, but I played for him in rec department. Lon, I know more so as a name. I don't remember really seeing you play. Ryan, that's some of my earliest high school basketball memories. His dad sneaking us into the gym and going to see you play. So this is big time. I've done probably 60 episodes, and I still get nervous when I talk to you guys because you guys are such legendary names from back in the day. So thank you for doing this. But I'm curious, like everybody else, Murph, who's tonight's winner?
Listen, Lonnie said earlier, I think that this was, or you might have said it, this is a tight decision to make here. I'm looking at Paul's lineup. Paul's lineup was full of guards, and then he came up with a great pick of Peter Johnson and then Neely Nelson. That strengthened that team. I was worried about it being too small. Lonnie, he's got some competitive people. Travis, Stevie, Jalbert, Brent Marquis, Gary Thibodeau, Aaron Berthiaume. Ryan, he's got shooters, rebounders, size, ball handling. Charlie, J.R. Boucher, Anthony Lamar. The first spot, he came up with the first father and son combo. Charlie Bard, your team has all it takes. You've got scoring, you've got rebounding, you came up with, I was worried, Charlie, you needed a ball handler, and Seth Rivera and Bobby Parent can play the point as well as a 2-guard. So a tight matchup. But I think Charlie's 160 names finally got him a victory.
I thought you were going to say he was fourth.
Well, Coach, you mentioned it early. You said hard work pays off, and certainly Charlie has put some hard work into these last few podcasts. I think it's paying off.
Attaboy.
Thank you, Coach.
But really, boys, I'm looking at this, and this would be quite a tournament to have these teams play each other. You know, a little round robin action, and then seed them, and then play again. Yeah.
I want to take it to the next level. I want somebody to go to a PlayStation 4, create these players with their skill set, and simulate it. That's what.
All we've got is time right now. All we've got is time.
Also above our pay range.
I'd like to tell one last story before we leave, and it's been mentioned a couple of times. We talked about, you guys all paid me great compliments, and I had Paul in baseball, and he made our season successful that year. Talked to him out of tennis. But one of the greatest compliments I was ever paid, and any coach, you understand your team doesn't get anywhere until they learn to trust you and your decisions and your plans and your schemes. And I think, not at the time, but years later, I stopped and I told Lonnie this story the other day. The biggest compliment I was ever paid as a coach was against Limestone, who was a high-scoring run, gun, and shoot team. And we could score, but I didn't really believe we could run with them. So we're in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go. We're up 81-80. And I call for ice with 3 minutes to go. Up 1 point, not 2 possessions, but we were shooting bonus. The next foul was bonus. We ended up winning that game 98-84 because Ryan and Lonnie made 15 out of 16 free throws out of that ice formation. But the point that's complimentary is I didn't use a timeout to set it up. I yelled out ice, and not one player batted an eye. Not one player rolled his eyeballs. Lonnie circled the wagons, and we ran ice, and we beat a team that went on to be a state champion that year. And a very unorthodox. That took a lot of trust. That team had to trust. So that might be the best compliment I've ever been paid for my efforts or decision making.
Hey, Coach, who missed the free throw?
Well,
Ryan.
I was going to say I went for 2 for 2, and Juan went 13 for 14.
That's right.
All right. So one more thing I want to do before we get up out of here. Lon, I see you got something.
I got one comment. Like I think I was confused by the whole format here because I was under the impression that you couldn't draft anybody on the podcast, and that's the only reason I didn't draft Tom Bard.
You don't got to butter me up, man. The thing has been decided already. All right.
If I knew girls were allowed, I would have chose Emily ahead of my brother.
Charles, I want to get one thing that you have though. You said you have Matt Rosnell's all-time Kent starting 5. Just curious what that is.
Yeah. So actually, the list came back with only 5 players, and I was told that there might be a slight distaste for Kent, so 5 was all that he was going to provide. First player, again, I don't know if they're in order or not, but Tom Pelletier, Ryan Martin, Corey Thibodeau, Laughn Berthiaume, and Mitch Willett.
Oh,
that's a solid 5.
No doubt. Absolutely. Charles, I don't know what the biggest surprise is, the fact that you won or that your internet held up tonight.
I know. I'm so happy. It must be the hat. That's what I mean, my new go-to hat.
Yeah.
That's 2 wins for you tonight. 2 wins.
What's the other one?
The internet and the win.
No doubt.
Give Tom some love. Let's hear something for Tom here.
I'm good. I just appreciate you guys coming on here. This has been a lot of fun. We've been pumping out a lot of good stuff here, and I want to keep it going. So before we get up out of here, Lon, your final words for tonight's episode.
Hey, it's always good getting on with you. To be honest, the first time I got on, a little bit nervous about what it was going to be like. it's a pretty special thing to be able to spend a few days and reminisce about high school times and or whatever the topic is. And so I'm very appreciative of you making sure that everybody gets an opportunity to talk about the glory days. It's a lot of fun.
I can't wait to see who you get next for me here. I'm excited because you've been on a roll here. So speaking of guys you got for me, Paul, your final words before we get up out of here tonight.
Gosh, like Lonnie says, just echoing that, it's echoing what Coach Murphy says. It's seeing the success of some of the folks that you've worked with. I was fortunate enough to work with Lonnie and Ryan. Work with Lonnie in the rec department, but also kind of coach him and then work with him as an assistant. Ryan, I remember, it was a big deal to get over to my hoop over in St. John. He had to convince Joyce to let him come down, and I think that was big. It's cool to see him. Charlie, obviously, Charlie's an icon in Fort Kent. Certainly, and talking about Tom too, to hear, I was fortunate enough to coach some kids down here in Kittery and Trape Academy, and to hear and the connections that they've made with some of you guys, like Mikey Sinclair to go up to Fort Kent and Robbie Rochester and those guys. It's a small world, and we're lucky that we have these the technology to bring us a lot closer together, and especially in times like this, I think it kind of gives us an hour and a half, 2 hours of just thinking nothing but good times. So Tom, thank you so much for what you're doing.
We're gonna get a spin-off, a solo podcast. We're gonna make that happen.
Yeah, I'll have to check my calendar. I don't know. We could do a solo one. We could do the rec one. I think the Fort Kent rec department has a lot of great stories. Just the teams that I was able to coach those days. That was a lot of fun. We can chat.
We could even just do a Marquis family one, I think.
That's true. I got one last thing to say too. Paul, Rob Rochester, he's in Nova Scotia now too. He's about 4 hours away. And my last thing I want to say is right now, if we could lace them up, I'm going to go Coach Murphy, Coach Marquis versus Laughn and Ryan. Murph and Marquis for the win.
Really, that's 3 wins for you tonight. 3 wins for you tonight.
Hey, we're talking golf shoes, right?
Golf shoes. Okay.
We got to get Ryan's final words before we get up out of here. Charles, you cut the line, but that's all right. You won tonight. You're feeling good. But Ryan's final words.
Honored, obviously. Laughn has been on me for at least a year to get on this show, and honestly, I've been paying attention and I've been listening. It's been awesome to actually hear the interviews and hear the stories, and to be able to actually come on here for the first time with this group. It's amazing. So thanks for having me. It was awesome. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be. I was really nervous about my picks, but they turned out really well, and I actually think I had the best team, coach, but I'm not going to disrespect you.
You've got a good team. You've got a good team, but not the best team.
Hey, Ryan, does that mean we're going to get a solo spinoff here as well? We're going to get a solo pod?
I hate talking about myself, but we'll see what we can do.
You don't talk about yourself. You just tell stories, just like you have tonight.
Yeah, all good.
And we're going to wrap up with Coach Murph. Your final words before we get up out of here.
I was nervous about my role, but then I said it's basketball, so I should be pretty comfortable with basketball. And I was surprised at how many names of people and how often I had contact with almost everybody that was mentioned, either watching them grow as players or having something to do with their growth as a player. So this has been super, really, really, really enjoyable. And and you know what? It's nice to see all you guys. I haven't seen Paul in ages. I haven't seen Rhino in 20 years probably. And you better show up here in a month, like you say.
He's got firewood to split.
I'll be there. Well, I need to get a workout in after this stay-at-home thing. So
yeah. And no, it was awesome. It was awesome to see you all. And Tommy, you do this. This has been great for everybody. I love the Hack League thing. I'm going to go back and try to get the soccer thing done. I'll get through that glitchy first opening half hour or whatever. Yeah. But no, this is awesome. This is awesome. I've had a ball. I'm glad Lonnie thought of me, and that's basketball. It's easy.
Charles, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just talk, buddy.
Well, I don't like to cut off a legend here. So I like to create controversy. Coach Murphy, if you have one pick in the draft, you going Laughn or Ryan?
If I had one pick in the draft, would I go with Laughn or Ryan?
Or who would you shut her down?
Oh, geez, that's rough. That's rough.
What I do. It's what I
It's
do.
okay, Coach. It's
When
okay, Coach.
hey, listen, I'll do it this way. I'll get out of it sneaky like. When Lonnie was a senior, I'd have taken Lonnie. When Ryan was a senior, I'd take Ryan.
Safe answer right there. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's gonna do it for tonight's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everyone who came through. This was to say big time at the least right there. So make sure to check out all the older episodes on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. You name it, we got it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.